The night the man with the calm eyes walked into Millbrook County Library, Jenna Reade was 17 minutes from locking up and going home to a bowl of cereal she didn't feel like eating. It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind of night where the wind comes in sideways and the parking lot empties out by 7. Jenna had already shelved the last of the returns, dimmed the overhead fluorescents in the children's section, and was running a damp cloth along the reference desk when she heard the front door open. She didn't look up right away. Late visitors weren't unusual. Sometimes it was a college kid who'd lost track of time in the periodicals room. Sometimes it was someone just looking for warmth. But this man didn't feel like either of those things. He was wearing a gray overcoat, no bag, no books under his arm. He moved through the front entry the way people move through places they've already memorized, not looking around, not hesitating, just walking with a fixed internal compass, pointed somewhere specific. He had the face of someone who smiled easily in rooms where smiling was required and felt watched him when the smiling stopped. Jenna watched him from behind the desks. "We close in 15 minutes, she said. He nodded without looking at her. "I know." He went toward the reading room at the back, a long, narrow space lined with tall oak shelves and 4 leather chairs arranged near a window that looked out onto a brick wall. Jenna knew that room well. She'd spent 12-hour shifts in it for 3 years. She knew every corner of it and every person who tended to use it. The man currently using it was not a regular. His name was Arthur Gale. He'd been coming in every afternoon for 9 days. He was 61, soft-spoken, and missing 2 fingers on his left hand from something he'd never explained. He always sat in the chair nearest the emergency exit, always ordered the same stack of periodicals from 1987 through 1994, and always had a thermos of coffee he wasn't supposed to have in the building, which Jenna had never once mentioned. Jenna had looked him up on the 3rd day. Old habit. She'd found a short article from a federal news wire, dated 11 years ago. Retired Signals Intelligence Officer testified in a closed-door Senate hearing about a private contracting firm called Veltridge Group. The article said the testimony was sealed. It also said that 2 other witnesses from the same hearing had died within 14 months, one in a car accident, one from a fall. Arthur Gale had moved 4 times since then. Jenna had kept that information to herself and said nothing, because what would she have said and to whom? She was a librarian in a county of 40,000 people. Her most pressing professional concern on any given morning was whether the new interlibrary loan system would stop timing out. But she had started paying attention. That was the thing about her particular history. It had never fully switched off, even when she wanted it to. Situational awareness was the kind of skill that didn't go dormant, it just waited. She set down the cloth. She walked to the reading room doorway without making it look like that's what she was doing. The man in the gray coat was standing near the back shelf, pulling a book out with one finger. He wasn't reading it. He was using it as a reason to face the wall so his back could face the room. From that angle, he could see the reflection in the dark window. He was watching Arthur Gale. Gale hadn't noticed yet. He had his reading glasses on and was bent over a folded newspaper, one hand curled around the band thermos, unbothered. Jenna stepped back from the doorway. She moved to the circulation desk, kept her voice quiet, her hands still. She had 12 minutes before close. Her phone was in her cardigan pocket. The library's direct non-emergency police line was programmed under the contact labeled facilities, which she had never once called for anything related to facilities. She did not call it yet. Instead, she went back to the reference desk and thought, carefully, about the layout of the building. She thought about where the exits were and which ones could be delayed from the inside without a key. She thought about the man's coat, which was too heavy for what the forecast had said, and about how he'd walked in with his right hand already loose at his side. Not swinging the way hands swing when people are relaxed. She thought about Arthur Gale, who had given 11 years of his life to staying hidden and had apparently decided that a Tuesday night at a county library was safe enough to let his guard down over a thermos of bad coffee and a newspaper from a decade before she was born. She felt something move through her chest that was not quite fear and not quite calm. Something older than either. She had felt it before, in places far less quiet than this, and she knew exactly what it meant. It meant that the next few minutes were going to matter. She picked up the cloth again and walked toward the reading room. "Mr. Gale," she said, coming in from the left side of the doorway, which put a shelf between her and the man in the gray coat. "I need to pull those periodicals you've got. We're running an overnight inventory on the 1980s collection." Gale looked up. He was confused. She'd never said anything like that before, but he was a careful man, and careful men learn to read signals. Something in her face must have communicated what her words hadn't, because he set down the newspaper slowly and said, "Of course. Sorry about that." "No trouble," she said. "If you want to wait up front, I'll get your coat check." There was no coat check. Gale knew there was no coat check. He stood. The man in the gray coat turned from the window. He had a placid expression, the kind that took effort to maintain. "Evening," he said to Gale pleasantly. Gale stopped. It was the kind of stop that happened below the level of conscious thought. A body recognizing danger, the way a dog recognizes thunder before the sound arrives. His shoulders dropped a fraction. His weight shifted to his back foot. "We're actually closing up," Jenna said, moving into the space between them. She held the stack of periodicals in both arms, which gave her a reason to be standing exactly where she was standing. "If you're looking for something specific in the collection, I can put in a hold for you." The man looked at her for the first time. His eyes moved over her the way eyes move over furniture, briefly, dismissively, already moving on. "I'm just finishing up," he said. "Great," Jenna said. "Front desk is right through here." She started moving, which forced Gale to move with her, which forced the man to either follow or be left alone in a room where his reason for being had just walked away. He followed. In the 22 steps between the reading room and the circulation desk, Jenna's mind was running a parallel track to the conversation her face was pretending to have. She was calculating. The man was taller than her by 6 inches and outweighed her by at least 60 pounds. He had something under the left side of that coat. The hang of the fabric was wrong on that side. Weighted, and still in a way, fabric wasn't when it was empty. The front door was 30 feet ahead. The staff entrance was behind her and to the left, through a door that required a keycard. The restrooms were a dead end. The fire suppression panel was mounted on the wall just beside the circulation desk. She had tested it twice in 3 years, both times by accident, both times producing a reaction from every person in the building that could be politely described as immediate and chaotic. She reached the desk. She set the periodicals down. She let her left hand drop to her side, close to the wall. "Let me just pull up your account," she said to the man in the gray coat, turning slightly toward the computer screen. He was watching Gale. Gale had stopped near the front display rack, a few feet from the exit. He was very still. "I don't have an account," the man said. "No problem," Jenna said. "I can set one up. Takes 30 seconds. "Name?" He looked at her again. This time he looked a little longer. Something in his expression shifted. "Not much, just enough." "You don't need my name," he said. "Okay," she said, and she hit the panel. The alarm was not subtle. It was a sound that came from everywhere at once, a harsh cycling wail that bounced off the high ceilings and the oak floors and the glass display cases and did not leave room inside a person's skull for anything else. Overhead, the suppression system read smoke it wasn't finding and hesitated. 2 seconds, 3, and then the sprinklers in the reading room kicked on, followed one by the sprinklers in the periodicals room and the children's section. Not in the front room. The front room was on a separate circuit, a quirk of the building's age that Jenna had complained about in writing to the county facilities office twice, and that she had quietly stopped complaining about 6 months ago when she understood that it might someday be useful. The man in the gray coat flinched at the alarm. A small flinch, controlled, but real. His hand moved toward his left side. Jenna had already moved. She was not in the spot she'd been in. She had stepped behind the desk in the same motion that hit the panel, putting 30 inches of solid oak countertop between herself and him. She had her phone in her hand. She was already dialing. "Don't," she said, loudly enough to be heard over the alarm. He stared at her. "Whoever told you he'd be here tonight was wrong about something else too," she said. She kept her voice flat, the way she'd been trained to keep it, No anger, no fear, just information delivered at a pitch that carried. There are 2 cameras in this building. One is visible. She nodded toward the corner mount above the door. One isn't. His eyes moved to the corner mount. They stayed there a half-second too long. The footage goes off-site, she said. Automatically. There's no server here to take. The line connected. She heard the dispatcher's voice, and she said, clearly, "This is Millbrook County Library on Route 9. I need a unit. I have a man on premises with a concealed weapon who is not a patron. Please respond immediately." She kept her eyes on him while she said it. The man in the gray coat stood in the center of the library floor, with water running through the ceiling of the room behind him, and a sound that made thinking difficult, and a woman behind a desk who was looking at him the way people looked at something they had already figured out. He made a calculation. She watched him make it. He turned and walked out the front door. The alarm was still going. Jenna came around the desk and found Arthur Gale standing by the display rack with his thermos in one hand and his coat folded over his arm, watching the door. "He's going to get into a dark blue sedan," she said, "parked on the south side of the lot, facing out. He came in that way so he could leave fast." Gale looked at her. "How do you know that?" he said. "Because it's what I would have done," she said. She gave her statement twice that night, once to the first officer who arrived, and once to a woman in a dark blazer who arrived 40 minutes later and showed credentials that were federal and didn't invite follow-up questions. The man in the gray coat had been picked up 2 blocks away. The sedan was where Jenna had said it would be. Gale sat in one of the library chairs while all of this happened. He didn't go anywhere. He didn't offer information about himself until the woman in the dark blazer sat down across from him, and he seemed to decide, after a long moment of looking at the floor, that he was done being quiet. Jenna stood near the desk and let the professionals do what professionals do. And she answered what she was asked, and she did not offer what she wasn't asked for, because that had always been her way. At some point, the woman in the blazer came over to her. "Ms. Reade," she said, "how did you know he wasn't a patron?" Jenna thought about it for a moment, not because she didn't know the answer, but because she was deciding how much of the answer to give. "His hands," she said finally. "He came in without anything to carry. No bag, no books, but his hands weren't relaxed. People who come to libraries to read or browse, their hands hang loose. His right hand was ready." The woman looked at her for a moment. "What did you do before this?" she asked. "I was in the army," Jenna said. 18 Delta. The woman nodded slowly. "Special Forces Medical Sergeant." She knew what that meant. She didn't say so. "Long way from field medicine to Millbrook County," she said. "I needed quiet," Jenna said. It was the truest thing she'd said all night. The library stayed closed the next morning for the investigation, which meant Jenna had the building to herself. She came in at 8 because she always came in at 8, and because there were holds to process and a story times 11. She wasn't going to cancel on 12 4-year-olds just because a hitman had been in the periodicals room. She was sorting the holds when her cell phone rang. Unknown number, which she answered anyway. "Ms. Reade." It was Arthur Gale. His voice sounded like a man who had been awake all night doing the arithmetic on a narrow escape. "I wanted to call." "You didn't have to," she said. "I wanted to," he said again. "I've been sitting here trying to figure out what I'd have done if you hadn't." He stopped. "I don't know what I would have done." "You might have been fine," she said, which was kind and also not entirely true. "I don't think I would have," he said quietly. She was quiet for a moment. Outside, through the library window, the October light was flat and gray and the parking lot was empty. "The periodicals will be available again Thursday," she said. "The 1987 through 1994 run. Same shelf." A pause. Then, "I'll be there." She set the phone down and went back to the holds cart and thought about the word quiet, what it meant to want it, what it cost, and what it sometimes asked of you without warning. She shelved the first book, then the second. She had 63 more and story time at 11, and a 12-year-old's biography of Ada Lovelace that had been waiting 3 weeks for its reader to come pick it up. The day, by any measure, had already started better than the last one had ended. She kept working.